For decades, if you flew low over the English countryside at night and saw strange glowing orbs skipping across the surface of a lake, you might have thought it was a UFO. But those weren't aliens. Those were the wild ideas of one man, Barnes Wallis. He didn't just invent a bomb. He invented a way for a bomb to cheat physics. A bomb that could skip like a stone across water, then slam into the face of a concrete dam, then explode deep inside the wall where no ordinary bomb could ever reach. The bouncing bomb. The weapon that turned a peaceful reservoir into a roaring torrent of destruction. The weapon that broke the industrial heart of Nazi Germany in a single night. And the man who dreamed it up was not some young hotshot engineer. He was already in his 50s. He had white hair, thick glasses, and the quiet stubbornness of a man who had spent his entire life being told that his ideas were impossible, only to prove everyone wrong. Barnes Neville Wallis was born in the year 1987. Wait, no, 1987 is wrong. He was born in the year 1887 in Derbyshire, England. His father was a doctor. His mother came from a family of clergymen. Middle class, respectable, careful. Young Barnes was the opposite of careful. He was obsessive. He took things apart. He rebuilt them better. At school, he was brilliant at mathematics and physics, but terrible at Latin and Greek, the subjects that proper English boys were supposed to master. He didn't care. He wanted to build things that moved, things that flew, things that broke the rules of what was supposed to be possible. At 17, he left school and went straight to work, not at university, but at the Thames Engineering Works in London. He started as an apprentice. He learned how to file metal by hand, how to read blueprints, how to make steam engines breathe. Most boys his age were still studying poetry.
Barnes was learning how to make machines obey him. By the outbreak of the First World War, he was already working on airships, the giant, fragile beasts that Britain hoped would rule the skies. He designed the framework for the R-100, one of the most advanced airships ever built. When it flew to America and back in 1919, the first airship ever to make the double crossing, Barnes Wallis was one of the men who made it possible. But airships were doomed. The Hindenburg disaster was still years away, yet the writing was already on the wall. So Wallis moved on. He moved to Vickers, the great armaments and aviation company. And there he began to do something extraordinary. He began to think about bombs. Most people in the 1930s thought bombs should be bigger, more explosive, heavier. Wallis thought differently. He asked the question no one else was asking. What if the bomb didn't need to be bigger? What if it just needed to be cleverer? He looked at dams. Not just any dams. The massive concrete walls that held back the rivers of the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heart of Germany. Those walls supplied water to steel mills, power plants, factories that made tanks, guns, aircraft. If you could destroy those dams, you wouldn't just flood a valley. You would drown an entire war machine. But how do you destroy a dam that is 200 feet thick at the base? How do you make a bomb reach the middle of the wall when gravity wants to pull it straight down into the water? Barnes Wallis had an answer. An insane, beautiful, childlike answer. Make the bomb bounce. He went back to his childhood. He remembered skipping stones across ponds. Flat stones, the right angle, the right speed. They would bounce 3, 4, 5 times before they sank. What if you could do the same thing with 5 tons of high explosive? The idea sounded like madness. The Air Ministry laughed. Senior officers told him he was wasting time. Bombs don't bounce. Bombs fall.
End of story.
Wallis didn't listen. He went home. He filled his garden with buckets of water. He took his children's marbles. He borrowed his daughter's toy pram wheels. He built little wooden models. He threw them. He filmed them. He measured angles. He calculated spin. He proved, on paper, on film, in the garden, that a spinning bomb released at the correct height, at the correct speed, at the correct angle, could skip across water like a child's stone, and then slam into the dam wall and sink. But theory was not enough. He needed proof, real proof. So he convinced Vickers to build a full-scale test rig. They constructed a wooden sphere the size of a dustbin. They filled it with concrete. They attached a motor to make it spin. They dropped it from a crane into a test tank, and it bounced. Again, and again, and again. The Air Ministry still said no. Too risky, too strange, too expensive. Then came the darkest months of the war, 1942. The Germans were winning in North Africa. The U-boats were strangling Britain's lifelines. The RAF was bleeding bombers and crews every night over Germany. They needed a miracle. Barnes Wallis gave them one. The bouncing bomb was not born in a laboratory. It was born in a bathroom. Barnes Wallis would sit for hours in his bathtub at home in Effingham, Surrey, not relaxing, thinking. He filled the tub with water. He dropped marbles, coins, spoons. He watched how they skipped when spun just right. His wife Molly would knock on the door. "Barnes, are you ever coming out?" He would answer, "Just one more experiment, dear." He was 55 years old. Most men that age were thinking about retirement, golf, grandchildren. Wallis was thinking about angular velocity, coefficient of restitution, and how to keep a 5-ton cylinder of Torpex spinning at 500 revolutions per minute while it bounced across 600 yards of black water at exactly 60 feet altitude. He needed data, real data, not garden marbles.
So he went to the Reculver bombing range on the Kent coast. It was January 1943. The sea was freezing. The wind cut like a knife. Wallis's team built a wooden mock-up of the bomb, a perfect cylinder, 3 feet in diameter, painted black. They mounted it under a Wellington bomber, the only aircraft they could borrow that had a big enough bomb bay. They modified the bay doors. They cut holes. They hung the bomb on a special spinning mechanism driven by a hydraulic motor. The first drops were disasters. The bomb shattered on impact. The casing cracked like an eggshell. The wooden mock-up disintegrated into splinters that floated away on the tide. Wallis didn't panic. He redesigned the casing. He made it stronger. He changed the shape slightly, more like a dustbin than a perfect cylinder. He added wooden planks around the outside to protect the real explosive fill during the bounces. He kept experimenting. Then came the breakthrough. They dropped the bomb from a modified Wellington at low level, at night, over the sea. The aircraft flew at exactly 60 feet, so low that the pilot could see the white foam of his own propellers churning the water. The bomb was released. It hit the water, and it skipped. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Each bounce perfect, each one losing just enough energy to keep going forward. The observers on the shore stood in silence. Then they cheered. But the Air Ministry was still not convinced. They wanted proof that this ridiculous skipping toy could actually crack a real dam. So Wallis did the next logical thing. He built a 1/10 scale model of the Möhne Dam, the biggest and most important target in the Ruhr. He built it in a water tank at the National Physical Laboratory. He filled the tank with water. He scaled everything down: the height, the thickness of the wall, the explosive power. Then he dropped his miniature bouncing bombs. The results were spectacular. The tiny bombs skipped across the surface, hit the model wall, sank, and exploded. Each explosion sent a miniature tsunami across the tank. The wall cracked. Water poured through. Wallis had his proof on a scale model. But scale models are not real dams. He needed full-scale destruction. He needed the real thing. By now, word had reached the very top. Lord Cherwell, Churchill's scientific advisor, was intrigued. Churchill himself was shown the films of the bouncing bomb tests. He loved it. He loved anything bold, anything that defied the Germans at their own game of engineering superiority. But there was still one massive problem. No aircraft in the RAF inventory could carry the weapon as it now existed. The bomb had grown. It was now 10 feet long, almost 5 feet in diameter, and weighed 10,000 pounds, 4 times heavier than the standard bomb load of a Lancaster. The bomb bay of a Lancaster was too small. The doors wouldn't close. The aircraft would have to fly with the bomb exposed underneath, like a pregnant whale. Wallis went back to Vickers. He went to the drawing board. He redesigned the entire bomb bay of the Lancaster, removed the doors, built a new cradle, a new release mechanism that would spin the bomb backwards at exactly 500 revolutions per minute. The aircraft would have to fly at precisely 190 miles per hour at precisely 60 feet above the water at night under heavy anti-aircraft fire with spotlights sweeping the sky. It was suicide on paper, but Barnes Wallis didn't care about paper. He cared about physics. The project now had a name: Operation Chastise. The squadron that would fly it was formed in secret, number 617 Squadron, led by a 24-year-old wing commander named Guy Gibson, already a legend, already the holder of 2 distinguished flying crosses, already the man who would have to convince 200 young airmen that this mad idea could work. Wallis met Gibson. He explained everything: the spinning, the height, the speed, the angle. Gibson listened. Then he said the words that every engineer dreams of hearing: "We'll do it." They called it the Dam Busters, not because they were going to destroy dams, although that was the plan. They called it that because the very idea sounded like something out of a comic book. A squadron of young men, most of them barely out of their teens, training to fly heavy bombers at treetop height at night over enemy territory while spinning a 10,000-pound bomb backwards and dropping it from exactly 60 feet so it would bounce like a child's pebble into the heart of Hitler's industrial fortress. Guy Gibson was 24. He already looked older. He had flown more than 100 combat missions. He had buried more friends than most men his age had ever known. He had the Victoria Cross waiting for him, Britain's highest award for gallantry, although he didn't know it yet. He was the perfect choice to lead 617 Squadron. Fearless, charismatic, and just stubborn enough to believe Barnes Wallis's mad idea could actually work. The squadron formed in March 1943 at a quiet airfield called Scampton in Lincolnshire. They arrived in the middle of the night. No fanfare, no press. Just a handful of Lancasters painted matte black underneath with their mid-upper turrets removed to save weight. The crews were told almost nothing, only that they were on special duties. Many thought they were going to drop some new super weapon on Berlin.
When they finally saw the bomb, this enormous cylindrical thing, painted bright yellow and looking more like an industrial boiler than a weapon, jaws dropped. Training began immediately, and it was brutal. They had to fly at exactly 60 feet above the ground, so low that the aircraft's altimeters became useless. Instead, they used two spotlights mounted under the nose and tail.
When the two beams touched on the water or on the ground, they were at precisely 60 feet. The pilots had to hold that height while traveling at 190 miles per hour, through valleys, over hills, under power lines, past church steeples. One mistake, and they were dead. They practiced on English reservoirs, Derwent Reservoir, Ladybower. They flew mock attacks again and again and again, night after night. The bomb aimers learned to release the weapon at exactly 440 yards from the dam wall, measured by eye, with the moon behind them to silhouette the target. The wireless operators learned to jam German radar. The gunners learned to stay silent until the last possible second. And Barnes Wallis watched it all. He was there on the ground, night after night, chewing his pipe, scribbling notes. He was exhausted. He was worried. He knew the odds. He knew that 1 in 3 of these boys might not come back. But he also knew something the Air Ministry still refused to fully accept. This was going to work. The bomb itself, now officially called Upkeep, was perfected. The wooden casing was kept on for the drop. It would splinter away on the first bounce. The real explosive was Torpex, a mixture so powerful it was 40% more destructive than TNT. The fuses were set to go off 11 seconds after the final bounce, deep against the dam wall, underwater, where the shockwave would be magnified by the pressure of the lake behind it. But there was still doubt. Even Gibson had his moments. One night after training, he found Wallis alone in the hangar, staring at the bomb. Gibson asked, "Do you really think this will do it?" Wallis looked up, quiet, calm. "I don't think, Gibson. I know." Then came the final test. On the 17th of May, 1943, just 2 days before the real operation, they did a full dress rehearsal. The bomb was the real thing. No explosive, but everything else perfect. The aircraft flew to Reculver again. Gibson's Lancaster dropped the bomb. It skipped. It hit the seawall. It exploded. The blast was so powerful it shattered windows miles away. The shockwave rattled the teeth of the ground crew. Wallis stood on the shore. He didn't smile. He simply nodded. It was ready. Now there was only one thing left: the moon. They needed a full moon. They needed clear skies over Germany. They needed the reservoirs to be full after the winter snows. And they needed all three to happen on the same night. That night was the 16th of May, 1943. The moon was full. The weather forecast was perfect. The reservoir wings almost brushing the waves. So low that sea spray coated the windscreens. So low that German radar could barely see them. They crossed the Dutch coast at treetop height, dodging flak towers, searchlights, power cables. One aircraft clipped the power line and crashed into the sea, the first loss before they even reached Germany. The rest pressed on. At 2:30 in the morning, the first wave arrived over the Möhne. The dam looked enormous in the moonlight. A curved white wall holding back 8 million tons of water. Gibson went in first. He flew straight at the wall, spotlights touching, speed exactly right. His bomb aimer released Upkeep. The bomb hit the water. It skipped. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it struck the dam wall and sank. 11 seconds later, a massive underwater explosion. A column of water shot 400 feet into the air, but the dam held. Gibson circled back. He told the others, "I think I see a jet of water." He was wrong. It was just spray. The wall was cracked but intact. Next came Hoppy Hopgood. His aircraft was already damaged, hit by flak over the coast. He went in anyway. His bomb skipped, hit the wall, but exploded on contact instead of sinking. The blast tore the Lancaster apart. It crashed into the lake. Only 2 men survived, taken prisoner. Gibson kept going. He flew alongside the next aircraft, flown by Melvin Young, to draw fire from the anti-aircraft guns. Young released. The bomb skipped perfectly. 3 bounces. It struck the wall dead center. Sank. Exploded. This time the dam shuddered. A huge crack appeared. Then another. Then the entire wall gave way. Millions of tons of water roared through the breach like a living thing. A 30-foot wall of water swept down the valley, destroying factories, bridges, power stations, entire villages. Over 1,600 people drowned that night, most of them civilians and forced laborers. The crews who saw it happen were stunned into silence over the radio. Gibson's voice broke the quiet. "I think she's gone." They turned to the Eder Dam, even harder. The approach was through a narrow valley. The pilots had to turn sharply, dive down, level out at 60 feet in seconds. David Maltby went in first. Missed. Then Henry Maudsley. His bomb struck the parapet and exploded on top of the dam. His aircraft was seen to fly straight into the explosion. No survivors. Then came Mick Martin. He attacked. Missed. Then Les Knight, the youngest pilot in the squadron. He went in low, steady, perfect. Released. The bomb skipped twice, hit the wall, sank, exploded. The Eder Dam burst. Another massive flood. Another valley drowned. The Sorpe Dam was different. It was an earthen dam, not concrete, much harder to crack with a single explosion. Joe McCarthy's aircraft attacked it alone after delays and losses. His bomb hit perfectly, but because it was an earthen dam, the explosion only caused a large crater. No breach. The Sorpe held. By dawn, 8 of the 19 Lancasters had returned to Scampton. 11 were lost. 53 men killed. 3 taken prisoner. Barnes Wallis waited in the operations room all night. When the first aircraft landed, he rushed out to meet them. He saw Gibson climb down from the cockpit, face black with soot, eyes red. Wallis asked quietly, "Did it work?" Gibson looked at him. Then he grinned, the tired grin of a man who had seen hell and come back. "The Moni's gone. The Eder's gone." Wallis burst into tears, not from joy, from the weight of what he had done. He had wanted to break the German war machine. He had broken something else too, the lives of hundreds of innocents caught in the floods. Later that morning, he wrote in his diary, "Destruction of the dams has been accomplished, but at what cost?" The morning after the raids, the Ruhr Valley was unrecognizable. A 30-foot wall of water had raced down the valleys at 30 miles per hour. It swept away factories, railway lines, power stations, mines. Over 1,300 people drowned, many of them Ukrainian and Polish forced laborers, sleeping in their barracks. The Möhn power station was gone. The steelworks at Nieheim-Hüsten were buried under mud. Electricity to the entire region collapsed. For weeks, German industry in the West limped along on emergency generators. The propaganda machines on both sides went into overdrive. Goebbels called it the greatest act of terror bombing yet. He ordered the newspapers to print photographs of drowned children and ruined homes. In Britain, the press was more restrained, but the headlines still screamed triumph. Dam busters strike. Raid on Ruhr Dam's success. Churchill watched the newsreels in silence. When he saw the floods, he turned to his aides and said simply, "The cost is high." Guy Gibson returned to Scampton a hero. He was awarded the Victoria Cross immediately, the youngest man to receive it in the war. The king pinned it on his chest at Buckingham Palace. The rest of the surviving crews received a shower of medals: 20 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 4 Distinguished Service Orders, 2 Conspicuous Gallantry Medals. Barnes Wallis was given nothing at first. No knighthood, no public honor. The Air Ministry still viewed him with suspicion, a civilian who had forced their hand. But the real impact was deeper than medals. The raids forced Germany to divert huge resources to defend the remaining dams. Anti-aircraft guns, searchlights, smoke generators, barrage balloons, all moved to the Ruhr reservoirs. Thousands of men who could have been fighting on the front lines were now guarding concrete walls. The psychological blow was even greater. The Germans had believed their dams were untouchable. Now they knew they were not. Wallis himself was changed by the operation. He had always been a quiet, private man. After Chastise, he became more withdrawn. He rarely spoke about the floods.
When asked about the civilian deaths, he would answer softly, "War is not a game. We did what we had to do." Yet in his private notes he wrote, "I have always hated the idea of killing women and children." The bouncing bomb was never used again in the same way. Wallis designed improved versions: Highball for attacking ships, Tall Boy, and Grand Slam earthquake bombs that could penetrate deep underground bunkers. These weapons were devastating. The Tall Boy sank the battleship Tirpitz in a Norwegian fjord. The Grand Slam cracked open the roof of the U-boat Pence at Brest. But none carried the same magic or the same controversy as the original Upkeep. 617 Squadron lived on. They became the RAF's elite precision bombing unit. They flew the last major raid of the war, attacking Hitler's mountain retreat at Berchtesgaden. They dropped the first nuclear weapon simulator, a dummy bomb shaped like the real thing, over the Pacific after the war ended. The squadron still exists today. They fly the newest Typhoons. Their badge still shows a broken dam and lightning. Barnes Wallis never stopped inventing. In his later years, he worked on variable sweep wings, supersonic airliners, deep penetration bombs. He designed ideas that were decades ahead of their time. Most were never built. He retired in the 1960s, still living in the same house in Effingham. He died in 1979 at the age of 92. His ashes were scattered over the English Channel, the same waters where his bouncing bomb had first skipped to life. Today, if you visit the Derwent Reservoir in Derbyshire, you can see a memorial to 617 Squadron. A black granite wall lists every name of the men who flew that night. 53 names are marked with a small cross. Beside the reservoir stands a full-size replica of the Upkeep bomb. Yellow, cylindrical, innocent-looking. Children play around it. They touch it. They have no idea that once, 60 feet above black water, under moonlight, men risked everything to make this strange thing bounce. Barnes Wallis didn't invent war. He didn't invent death. He invented a way to end a war faster, by breaking something the enemy thought unbreakable. And in doing so, he broke something inside himself too. The legacy of Barnes Wallis and the bouncing bomb is not measured only in broken concrete and flooded valleys. It is measured in the questions it still forces us to ask, even 80 years later.
Was it worth it? 53 young men dead. Hundreds of civilians drowned. Many of them not even German, but prisoners, forced to work in the shadow of the very dams they guarded. A weapon so precise, so clever, that it changed the rules of bombing forever, yet still killed the innocent in the same brutal way as a carpet of 500-pound bombs. Wallis himself wrestled with this until the end of his life. He never apologized for the raid. He believed, and history largely agrees, that shortening the war by even a few months saved far more lives than were lost that night. The Ruhr's industrial output dropped by almost 40% in the months that followed. Repairs to the dams took until 1944. Every gun, every worker, every searchlight moved to protect the remaining reservoirs could not be used against Allied bombers or on the Eastern Front. Chastise did not win the war, but it helped tip the balance. The story of the bouncing bomb also became something larger than engineering. It became myth. In 1955, a film called The Dam Busters was released. Michael Redgrave played Wallis, quiet, determined, brilliant. Richard Todd played Guy Gibson, handsome, fearless, doomed to die later in the war. The film ends with the raid itself, the dam breaking, the music swelling. It does not show the bodies in the floodwaters. It does not show Wallis crying in the operations room. It shows only triumph. The film was a huge success. It made 617 Squadron immortal. Even today, when the squadron flies a fly past, people still call them the Dam Busters. Even people who know nothing about the war know the name Guy Gibson, know the sound of the bouncing bomb skipping across water, a sound effect that has been reused in 100 documentaries and video games. But the real monument is quieter. It stands beside the Derwent Reservoir in Derbyshire, the same place where the crews practiced night after night. A simple black stone wall with 53 names carved into it. No grand statues, no soaring eagles, just names. And beside it, the yellow replica of Upkeep, now a children's climbing frame, painted bright, harmless. Barnes Wallis lived to see that memorial. He lived to see the film. He lived to see the world change from piston engines to jets, from bombers to missiles. He lived long enough to watch his strange, childlike idea become part of history. Studied in military academies, debated in ethics classes, remembered in pubs on Remembrance Day. He died on the 30th of October 1979. He was 92. His wife Molly had died 5 years earlier. They had no children of their own, but the crews of 617 Squadron, the ones who came home, became his family. They visited him. They called him the old man. They told him stories, and he listened, pipe in hand, eyes distant, remembering the garden marbles, the bathroom experiments, the night the moon was full and the dams broke. If you stand on the shore of Derwent Reservoir today, on a clear night when the moon is high, you can almost hear it. The low growl of 4 Merlin engines, the splash of a heavy bomb hitting water, the eerie skip, skip, skip across the surface, then silence, then thunder. That sound belongs to Barnes Wallis, a poor boy who loved machines, a stubborn engineer who refused to accept that some things could not be done.
A man who built a weapon out of a child's game and changed the course of a war. He didn't just break dams, he broke the idea that certain targets were safe. He broke the illusion of invincibility. And in the end, quietly, privately, he broke his own heart a little too. Be bold, be precise, be quick, and never, ever accept the word impossible. That was Barnes Wallis, and that was the bouncing bomb.